All right, good evening, listeners. You're listening to the Lament of Hope podcast, and I'm here today with Bobby Schindler. It's a blessing to get to talk with him. Many of you might know of him. He's the brother of Terri Schiavo, um, who was really the main character in a series of several unfortunate but controversial lawsuits as to whether or not life and death should be decided for a person. And I'm here today with her brother just to discuss with him more about that and to get to hear his perspective. This did happen over 20 years ago, but it's still very pertinent today as we face life and death questions. So, Bobby, just to get started, how old were you when this was happening with your sister? Because this started in the late 1990s, right? And went to early 2000s.
Well, actually, it started soon after Terry's when she had her accident. So she had her accident in 1990 in February, and at the time she was just what 26 years old. I was 25, and
Okay.
it was only 2 years after that, more like 3 years, uh, when Michael already started to try and enter life. So if you look at 1993 as kind of the starting point, we're looking at really 20 years. Our family, well, not 20, she died in 2005. So from 93. So our family was really trying to defend Terry's life for what, 13 years. It,
And
it, it wasn't it wasn't just Terry's case started making news or publicity somewhere in the early 2000s, but
okay.
the fight began long before that.
And she suffered cardiac arrest in her home, and
Correct.
then she was taken to the hospital and they realized that she had severe brain damage. So didn't is it correct that they tried for 2 years to see if um she could come back to some sort of awareness by doing different therapies and such after that
Yeah,
time?
go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
That's accurate. I mean, they treated Terry just like they would treat anybody with, essentially with that type of brain injury. They evaluated her condition, which I like to kind of clarify. It was a short time after Terry's collapse, as I mentioned, in 1990, where, not knowing what was going to happen those first few days, to where a few weeks later, she was completely free from any type of machine or any type of artificial life support keeping her alive. And it was really from that point on, very early on, that the only way of sustaining her, or method of sustaining her, whatever way you want to describe it, was food and water through a feeding tube. She had difficulty swallowing because of the brain injury, and therefore needed her food to be and water to be administered through a feeding tube, which are a very common way to provide someone food and hydration if they have difficulties swallowing. It's a very easy procedure. So shortly thereafter Terry's collapse, she did need a feeding tube, and shortly thereafter her collapse, we had a rehab doctor, Dr. Barris, who recognized Terry as being a good candidate for therapy and rehabilitation. And so under his I guess, care and advice, she was admitted to a rehab center and started to receive aggressive therapy and rehabilitation. I'm not, I don't know the exact time frame, but it was within that first year of her, well within that first year, maybe even several months of her collapse, or her brain injury.
Now, did you see any progress during that time? Did the therapy seem to be of any help?
They were, and again, there's so much about Terry's case that's so frustrating today, with the way it's reported, and all the inaccuracies that exist, because she was showing improvement. In fact, and I like to say, Danielle, the things that I say I try to make sure it all can be documented
Yeah.
and support it. I'm very conscious and sensitive to saying things that can be, as I said, I mean, for the most part, can be validated. And
Yeah.
you don't have to take my word for it. We actually have notes from Michael Schiavo where he was encouraged by the therapy and rehabilitation she was receiving. But aside from Michael's hope that he was seeing with Terri's progress, I mean, it was slow and it was minimal, but she was moving in the right direction. And there was even notes in her medical files from the nurses who were providing her caring for her every day during that time that she was starting to form words and she was showing uh, uh, signs of improving in response to therapy and rehabilitation.
And do you remember, because I'm guessing you would have visited her several times during this time. Did you have a lot of hope for your sister, or how were you feeling during this time that you were seeing them seek to rehabilitate so that she could communicate better?
Right. So this was around the 1991 time frame. She was transferred to Bradenton, Florida, which was less than an hour from St. Petersburg, where I live. I did not. I think I might have, and I forget for the duration she was there, several weeks, if not longer.
Mhm.
But I don't remember going there more than once or twice to visit her. I was getting all my information from my parents, who were there. Particularly, my mom was there every day. I think they were staying down there during this time with Michael. I was having my own difficulties at that time. I guess handling or processing what happened to my sister.
Hmm.
That I didn't really share with a lot of people, but I was having some problems. I was having difficulties visiting her. Um, I was really impacted by her injury. Um, to the level or to the severity of her disability. You know, it was so unexpected that, you know, we were blindsided. You know, one day she was perfectly fine and healthy, and then unexpectedly, you know, she experiences this brain injury.
Hmm.
But I remember, I mean, I remember how encouraged my parents were, how encouraged Michael was at that time, because she was starting to improve. And I just want to make a little side note. You know, through all this, I mean, it mattered, but my parents weren't going to make any decision uh, based on whether Terri, what should I say, decision, any type of, it never entered their mind that they would do anything but do whatever they could
Hmm.
to care for Terri. That they would never entertain for a minute, a second, that regardless of her improvement or lack of improvement, that they would ever think of not wanting to care for her anymore, just in the condition, whatever condition she ended up being in, that's the way my parents were going to care for her. And that's all that mattered. Terri was their daughter. She was a human being. She was alive. Uh, she was physically healthy, although she had the brain injury.
Hmm.
But you know, as much as my parents were hoping she would improve, and they would do everything they can to provide her the chance at improvement. Unfortunately, that was Michael had stopped all that at some, you know, not shortly thereafter. When
What
we
did
had,
you share that hope with your parents of, thinking perhaps she may be able to get better? Or for you, I know you were expressing that it was a shock to you, it was hard to process, which is understandable. Um, did you think your sister would be able to get better again? Or, I mean, how did you kind of process this with what your future would look like with your relationship with her?
yeah, I didn't know. I mean, we had no. I mean, everything we were hearing from the neurologist at the time who was caring for her, he was very, his prognosis was very grim. He did
Okay.
not see Terri improving much from her condition. Dr. Barris was different. He thought that she could. If I remember, you know, the conversation we had back then, he had other patients and similar types of who experienced different types of brain injuries that did show response. You know, every patient, every person, every brain injury is different, and it affects them differently. So it's hard to really predict or anticipate what might happen. I mean, yes, sometimes doctors are they get it right, so to speak, with their prognosis, but there's countless. I mean, I have them on our website. All the times doctors were wrong. They were incorrect with what they thought was going to be the future as far as a person's recovery. So we just you know, our family we were a close family, and we were just going to work to try and help my sister and take it day to day. And you know, whatever happened that day, we were, you know, we would just manage it at the time. But we felt blessed that Terri was alive, and we were hopeful that she would make some type of progress from the care that she was receiving.
Now,
It's
when
really as simple as that, Danielle. I mean, it wasn't, you know, I don't think there was any kind of long-term thought. Like, the only long-term thought I think our family was thinking at that time was, okay, are we going to be in a position to somehow bring Terri home at some point? You know, with the expense of it, with her condition, will we be able to care? You know, what are we going to need in a home setting to care for Michael? Obviously, because at the time we had no reason to think he would ever change or shift his position as far as his love and care for his wife, or want to care for his wife. I'm sorry. So go. What were we going to say?
I was just gonna say, when did so she had these a couple years of therapy, and then when did you start seeing a shift where you and Michael, her spouse, were not starting to see eye to eye on what the future might look like for her?
Yeah, again, it was we never expected it or anticipated it, but there was a you know, there's a lot. So there was a medical malpractice trial back in late 1992. Michael was holding Terri's treating physician and her gynecologist responsible for her collapse. The thought was that they should have found a potassium level in her blood test that would have indicated this possible cardiac arrest due to an eating disorder, some type of eating disorder. That was later proven. Um, uh, I wouldn't mind addressing the eating disorder issue because, again, it's being pushed even today by the media, when there was never, anyway. So let me stop there. So Michael initiated this lawsuit. He was suing for $20 million. This was in November of 1992. It was in front of a jury. He testified his wedding vows. He wanted to care for Terri for the rest of his life, her life. That's why he needed $20 million. There was never any mention that Terri would want to die if she was ever in this condition, which it surfaced later. There was never anything other than Michael's intention to care for Terri, regardless of her whether she would improve or not, and he needed the money in order to do so. The jury came back. They awarded. They established a medical trust fund close to $1 million instead of the 20 million. They came back with close to $1 million verdict. Michael walked away, I believe, with $600,000 for loss of what they would consider his wife, her, I guess, her normal capacity as a wife. And this was in, so by the time all the medical malpractice issues were settled, this was in January of 1993. February 14th, ironically enough, Valentine's Day, my father confronted Michael at the nursing home while he was visiting Terri. When was he going to start providing the therapy and rehabilitation that he had promised not only to the jury and to my family, essentially, but to Terri, for her lifelong care?
So did her just, I'm sorry, just to clarify, did her therapies that she was undergoing at that time, did they stop?
They stopped long before that.
Okay.
I would say sometime in, I think in early 1992, they had
Okay.
stopped. She was
And did they
basically,
stop for a reason, or?
well, I think at that time they felt like and I don't know if it was a money issue, an insurance issue, why they stopped the therapies. It could have been because they ran out of the resources to afford for
Okay.
therapy rehabilitation. I believe that was the reason. But during this time, and I don't want to get all, I mean, into the minutiae of Terri's case, but there was a doctor out in San Francisco that felt he had experimental implant surgery, deep stimulation surgery, that he would implant electrodes into Terri's brains. They found that it was showing some promise in people with brain injuries. So Michael, they raised the money. My mom and Michael flew out to San Francisco. They did the procedure. They came back. There was question to whether Terri was improving from the electrodes, from the stimulation. And that was kind of put on hold during the malpractice. But during that time, if I remember correctly, Dr. Here, it was a Japanese doctor. I don't remember the pronunciation of his last name. He wanted to take Terri to Shands Hospital in Gainesville, Florida, to continue with this electrode stimulation to see if, in fact, we can get it to help my sister. And that was one of the issues my dad confronted Michael with, because after the malpractice trial in November, and the money was now in place, my dad said, "Okay, Michael, when are you going to?" And I believe my dad specifically said, "When are you going to get Terri back to Shands?" At the recommendations of this doctor to continue this therapy to help hopefully improve her condition. And that's when the proverbial crap hit the fan. Michael erupted, said my family would no longer be in charge of Terri's care. It would be only him, and severed their relationship right then and there. Instructed the nurses, the staff, not to reveal any more medical information to my family, anybody, to only communicate to him. He was the guardian. He was appointed her guardian. So he had 100% control on her anything that had to do with medical decisions, it had to go through him. So my parents, on February 14th, 1990, everything changed. I mean, they were able to visit Terri, but that was essentially all they were able to do. And then it was later that spring, that my family learned that Michael made his first attempt to kill Terri. She had a UT infection, and Michael told the nursing staff not to treat it with antibiotics. Very simple way to treat it. Terri would have died of sepsis if they didn't give her antibiotics. The nursing home said no. In fact, I think it was the head of administration of the nursing home said, "Michael, we can't do that. It's against the law. We have to treat her sepsis." So that's the only reason. And a nurse actually privately and confidentially told my parents that Michael tried to do this, because they weren't supposed to share any of this information with my family. So if you look at the timeline, up until February 14th, 1992, everything was being done to provide whatever could be done to help Terri by Michael, and my parents were in full support. February 14th, everything changed. The money came in. So Michael tries to kill her that spring. He was living with another woman who he eventually asked to marry him. He actually married her after Terri died. And he was going to inherit $1 million upon Terri's death. So you kind of see everything kind of shifted. And this is the trigger. This is what started it all. This confrontation in the nursing home in February between my mom, my dad, and Michael.
How did you hear about it? Did your parents call you, or how did you become aware of the change?
I was actually living with my mom and dad at the time in a condo.
Okay.
And when I came home, they had shared with me what happened and what Michael did. And I was enraged and was ready to get into the car and go confront Michael. And my dad stopped me because he saw how mad I was, and he thought, things would get out of hand if I went over as angry as I was. So, but I was extremely upset.
And you were
It was
upset.
a betrayal. It was a complete betrayal by Michael, saying he was going to do one thing and then deciding he changed his mind.
And
that was even before we knew that he was going to try to kill her. just 2 months from that, just a few, what, 2, 3 months after that confrontation.
Right, because you were angry at the fact that you were being denied any access to any more of her.
That he was going to stop therapy, rehabilitation. He stopped. He completely isolated. Told my family, we can't. We're not going to know anything else. So yeah, he did a 180-degree shift. It was like a Jekyll and Hyde.
And how did you, so after when your family discovered that Michael was considering ending Terry's life and taking steps in that direction, um, how did you and your family kind of decide, okay, this is something we need to fight against in a court of law, as opposed to trying to figure this out just between, all the family members?
Well, we did initially. My dad sent him a letter and said, "Michael, you've obviously moved on with your life. Give us Terry." I mean, that's essentially what the letter said. I mean, we still have it. It's not. I think it's in the court records, I believe. And Michael ignored it. And when we found out that he tried to withhold antibiotics, my family filed a petition to remove him as guardian. And this was in, I think, the summer of 1993 or the fall, because we knew at that point his intentions. I mean, he had no intention. He was making it quite clear he didn't want to care for anymore, and we were going to have to do something to try and get her care back, so Michael wouldn't put her in harm's way. So now, just a quick note, Michael, if you would, his his um uh his account of February 14th, he said the reason he became engaged is because my dad confronted him about wanting some of the money that came in from the lawsuit. That was his description of and that's why he got upset, because my dad was asking for part of the insurance, the medical trust money, which he my dad had no right to that anyway. That was Terry's medical trust fund. So anyway, it wasn't true. I mean, my dad was there to ask Michael about my sister's future care, and that he promised to provide to her after the lawsuit.
And so you said that you filed for him to lose guardianship, and then what happened after that?
We did not. My parents were unsuccessful in removing him as guardian. So things kind of went back to where they were before that. They would just visit her. Michael still would not allow any information to be shared with my family. We did learn again. He tried to do it again. After the first attempt to withhold antibiotics, he moved her to a different nursing home, and he tried to do the same thing. Terry developed a UT infection, and he told the nursing staff not to treat it. Same scenario. The administration came back and said, "We can't do that, Michael," and they treated it with antibiotics. My family did not learn about that until it was quite some time, but it wasn't until 1997 that my family received a letter from Michael retained an attorney, and the letter said that they put us on notice that they were going to petition the court to ask permission to remove Terry's feeding tube of food and hydration. And this was in 1997. And
What was that day like for you guys receiving that letter?
it was just a shock. It was a shock, but I guess because of Michael's behavior, maybe it was just, maybe a shock is the wrong word. We were surprised. We didn't think Mike would ever, decide to deliberately starve and dehydrate Terry to death to kill her. But nonetheless, with the way if you go back and look the way he was acting and behaving, I guess that was, something that we should have expected he might try and do, and in fact he did. So
How did you feel about it personally?
well, it's just I think as any brother or as any son to the parents that love Terry unconditionally would react. I was just I was mad, and I just I started working with my mom and dad and my younger sister, and decided, we sat down and said, okay, we got to get an attorney. How are we going to fight this? And So that's when that's when it really started. That's when it really started to get intense as far as what our family needed to do to protect my sister. And I think the first thing we did was we had to find an attorney to stop it. Well, I think the first thing we said is we said, okay, we're going to fight this, and went out and found an attorney to fight him from being able to do this.
What, because you had mentioned earlier that what happened to Terry was a deep shock for you and unsettling. Um, it's interesting because there's this arc of over time, it seems like you've become a huge advocate against what's happening and you become very involved in the situation. Um, when did that change happen for you when you're like, okay, I've been a little detached here because of the emotional pain of this, and now I'm gonna take a forefront and actually fight this head on.
I would say the injustice of it all. Um, just to see how Terry was treated, to see how my parents were treated, just to see how the courts, just the injustice. I guess that's the one word I would use to really what triggered it for me, and seeing what eventually happened to Terry, and wanting to try and help other families that were actually approaching us as Terry's case started to gain more and more publicity. We were hearing from more and more families uh, telling us similar things were happening to them, not just with other family members, but with the healthcare system. And because Terry's case became so, it was such her name became an international. The case became an international, received international publicity. I think families felt that we at least had some advantage into being a voice for these families and individuals. And so I don't think I made it. I didn't know I didn't know during Terry's case that we were going to start doing this when she, I didn't think she was going to be, I thought we were going to be able to save her. I thought we were going to be able to stop this because it was such a egregious injustice. I mean, to this day, I still can't believe that this was allowed to happen, particularly because the whole case was built on lies. But it wasn't until after she died, I said, I can't go back. I got to do something to
Yeah.
not only help others, but to somehow make this injustice, to let people know just what a terrible injustice it was. Because I saw the way it was being reported and handled in the media, and just the things that were being said that were just so so inaccurate, and the lies that were being told. And I'm like, I gotta keep doing something to try and let people know that none of this is true, what's being said. Because it spoke directly to the other people like Terry, and conditions like Terry, and it could impact decisions that would affect their lives and their families' lives, and just these prejudices and biases that were prevalent and obvious towards people with disabilities. So it was all this, all of it kind of just happening. And so when Terry died, the decision was easy, I guess, at that point,
Hmm.
to want to continue to advocate for these individuals.
So as
So
the media started picking up this story, I mean, how did it feel for you? Because this is like, this is first an internal family tragedy, and then all of a sudden you've got all these people who are asking questions, wanting to know, and so now there's huge amount of people who are following what's happening. How, like, was that encouraging to you, or did you find that difficult to have all these people who are suddenly now concerned in what was going on?
yeah, that's a good question. My father's kind of his thinking and approach was he was going to do anything he could to within obviously the confines of the law. I mean, without breaking the law, to help his daughter, use that and any means possible legally. And it's funny they say we turn this in. Michael petitioned the court to end Terry's life. At that moment, it became a public case. I mean, so it wasn't. I always laugh when they say that you know they these the government got involved in a private a private family matter. Well, it was never really private once the courts got involved.
Yeah.
And my father, as I said, he was going to do everything possible, reach out to anyone uh, that he felt could help. And if it was the legislative body, if it was the governor, if it was the president, whoever, he was going to exhaust any possibility, anybody that he felt could save his daughter. So I don't know if that makes sense, if that answers your question,
So
but
for
yeah.
you, it was an asset to have so many people watching?
Well, we wanted to expose it. We wanted
Yeah.
to expose what Michael was doing. We wanted to expose the lies. We wanted to expose just how cunning Michael's attorney was, and how dishonest he was. We wanted to expose it all. We wanted to expose the people that we felt were just people that had terrible intentions. We didn't want people to think that what was happening was should happen.
Hmm.
And we didn't want people to think that what Michael and his attorney were saying were true, because they weren't. They were being completely dishonest. And the thing, Danielle, when we used to interview with the media, and we started to learn pretty quickly, because our family, when we got into this, we had no idea the influence and how the media was going to handle this. And ironically enough, we went to the media to get them involved, we told them about Terry's case. But I would tell the media, I got to the point, I'm like, look, because I saw what was happening. They would interview Michael, and they would, for the most part, they weren't validating the things that he was saying. They would just print it. So people would read it and they would think it would be true because Michael was saying it. They weren't checking to make sure what he was saying was true. And I would tell them before I would say, look, whatever I tell you in this interview, because we were getting, the interviews started coming just rapid fire at some point. And I'd say, look, whatever I say, please verify it. Don't take my word for it. I want you to make sure what I'm saying is honest and truthful and accurate. But please do me a favor. Do the same for him. Do the same for Michael. Do the same for his attorney. Anything they say, take a minute and verify and make sure what they're saying is accurate. It would never happen. Well, I shouldn't say never. I don't want to speak in generalities, or maybe I should. I'll speak in generalities. They wouldn't verify what I was saying, but they wouldn't verify what Michael was saying. So basically, it was pitting us, what we were saying, against what Michael was saying. And so people were kind of, reading the fight in the media the way. So I just thought it was terribly negligent and irresponsible for the most part, how the media was reporting this case. And then there was people in the media that were taking sides, that, their own prejudices were, and their own feelings and their emotions were starting to show up in the way they were reporting the case. And I could tell they were, just by reading it. And it would really, and I said, it's like, I don't want the media to report things about our family because they support us. I want them to be objective too. Because in being objective, they're going to see the lies that are being told, right? So it's not like they need to take sides. If they would just fairly and objectively and accurately report what was happening, they would have been able to at least validate to the public that what Michael and his attorney were saying and doing wasn't true. And some of the things that that they were saying about Terri, her condition, the case, Terry's wishes, it all could have been validated. It was all documented. Things that Mike was saying could have been they could have researched and found whether it was true or not. So it was a very eye-opening, frustrating experience. And it to this day, Danielle, there was just a documentary on my sister that was released last week. To this day, it continues, and I can't tell you how much it frustrates me and upsets me to see the stuff that's being reported about my sister. It's just not true. It's inaccurate, and I see it on social media, the Twitter, and just the terrible prejudices and towards people with disabilities, the name calling and the mean spiritedness towards these people. And it's like, wow, you want to talk about people that are really marginalized, and we throw around the word racism all the time nowadays. If it can't be applied to people with disabilities and people with severe brain injuries,
Mhm.
I mean, the things that they say about my sister and other people with brain injuries, it is uh I don't know quite the word to use, but it's just heartbreaking, it's eye-opening, it's frightening.
Is there something in particular that stuck out to you as extremely um hurtful, and something that, like, is there a particular story or a particular statement in general that really is difficult for you to swallow?
Well, the Family Guy did an opening episode about my sister. It was called Terri Schiavo the Musical, and it's probably one of the more offensive portrayals of my sister that I've had to watch. Seth MacFarlane, I think, is the producer of that show, and you can look it up. We have it on our YouTube station because I want people to see just the disdain they have for people with disabilities, and how offensive, and just it's not funny. I mean, I understand free speech and poking fun at people, but this crosses a line. So I think referring to my sister as a vegetable, comparing her to vegetables, it's just terrible. It's nasty, nasty stuff. Calling her brain dead, which in fact that's medically inaccurate. Terry was never diagnosed brain dead, but they just throw that term out there, I think, just to want to portray her in a way that kind of suits or justifies killing people like Terry. I mean, if you look, Danielle, and just interrupt me if I I just. But if you look back, and I'm not talking, and people want to kind of lump it into the Holocaust or what happened to I'm not. I'm referring to before that, and the T4 euthanasia programs, and the way the German doctors were treating the physically and the mentally inferior, and how they were
Mhm.
systematically killing them based on disability. We're doing the same thing today. The same exact reasons, the way we justify killing people like Terry and so many others like her today, believe me, it's happening every single day, and I can explain how I can say that. But what we are doing today to the marginalized, to the people like my sister, to the medically vulnerable that are unable to speak and care for themselves,
Mhm.
the same mentality and attitude that were being applied to the physically and mentally inferior back by the German doctors prior to the Holocaust. Look it up, do your own research. Again, don't take my word for it. Look it up yourselves, and you tell me if we're not doing the same exact thing today that we did back then.
How I know, because I know your time is limited. I wanted to ask, how was when you found out that Terry was not going to get the help? It was going back and forth for so long, and then you hear the news that, okay, this is, her feeding tubes removed, and then believe it was almost 2 weeks later that she died. Um, how was that experience for your family? Like, were you there when she passed away? How were you processing the fact that the fight had ended in the sense of her specifically?
Yeah, well, it's something you can never properly describe. Watching a human being being slowly starved and dehydrated to death. If it's something, if we do to an animal in the United States, you'll go to prison for doing it, for deliberately starving, dehydrating an animal to death. But yet we're doing it to human beings every day, and it's because feeding tubes have been reclassified as medical treatment, and that's basically what permits the removal of feeding tubes today, and allows uh, people with disabilities and the brain injured and the elderly and so many other medically vulnerable to be killed by dehydration and starvation the way Terry was. But I couldn't properly describe just the physical changes that were taking place, how grotesque it looked. My sister looked physically. Um, it was several days, 3 or 4 days before my sister died, that we said, "Mom, you're not going in there anymore. This is horrific. What's going on in there?" And we knew my sister was suffering just by her physical response, and we could see, because my sister she had some level of awareness, some level of consciousness. Danielle, I don't care. We had doctors that examined her that felt the same. We had probably more doctors on records that felt Terri had some type of awareness, was in a minimally conscious state, not in a vegetative state. And there's no doubt in my mind that she knew what was happening to her, which makes it even more painful, more inhumane. But she was being described by Michael and his attorney. Again, they were lying about what was happening in that hospice room. But it was ghoulish. It was something no family, particularly parents, should ever have to witness. Seeing their daughter, seeing their child, seeing any family member, seeing anybody being deliberately killed by taking away food and hydration. Think about what would happen to any one of us if we took away our food and hydration. And look at pictures of, and I go back to the Holocaust. If you want to see kind of a somewhat of, look at the pictures of the people in the concentration camps and what they were looking like after they were being starved and dehydrated to death. I mean, it's the only thing I could think of that could give you some type of an account of what Terri what looked like, at least physically. And that wouldn't even do her. I mean, to see it personally up front and in front of you could never describe it. I'll never forget it. It'll live with me until I leave this earth. But it's ultimately what killed my father. He could not live with the fact he wasn't able to stop this from happening, and seeing his daughter died this way it was too much. I mean, I don't know how any father could go through that experience and never come out and be the same person, and he wasn't. None of us were. And to ask a family, to ask anybody to watch their loved one die this way, it's one of the worst injustices, the worst types of humanity I could ever think you could do to a person, really.
Were you there when she died?
We were thrown out of the room. We wanted to be there. My sister and my little sister, Suzanne, and myself, we were there. We knew it was close. The hospice administrators came in and asked us to leave. We said, no, Terri, we know she's going to die, soon, we can tell. In fact, I think one of the nurses had said she's close. And the nursing home, the administrator said, you have to leave. We have to give her a quick assessment. It'll just be for a minute, and we'll let you right back into the room. So I believed them. My sister and I walked out. We're standing outside the door. Police got in front of us and said, you have to leave right now. And I said, what are you talking about? And they said, you have to leave hospice. You have to leave the hospice facility in the grounds immediately or you'll be arrested. I said, they told us it'd just be a minute. We want to be in there. We want to be with my sister when she dies. And the police officer got in my face and got nasty and said, you leave now, I'm putting the handcuffs on you. And I was like, oh, you gotta be kidding me. And my sister and I walked out.
Did they give a reason for that?
Yeah, because Michael wanted to be in the room alone. So it was 2 or 3 days before Terri died. CBS, I think it was CBS, inadvertently released Terri's obituary. It was publicized before she died, and someone got a hold of it and showed it to us, and I read it, and it said how Michael was cradling Terri in his arms the moment she died, surrounded by stuffed animals, blah blah blah. I'm like, what the heck is this? She wasn't dead. And so CBS completely, they retracted it right away. And so they removed us. So it was all orchestrated, Danielle. They wanted Michael in the room. So Terri dies. Terri's obituary comes out, and it's basically the same one that was written 2 days before she died. So, I mean, that's why we were removed, because Michael wanted to come across to the press and to the media as the compassionate, husband, and was there with Terri at the end. So he threw us out. We couldn't be there when Terri died. And I even said to the administrators, I said, look, I don't care. You can stand, bring the police in. I just want to be, if Michael wants to be there, fine. I want to be there with my sister. My sister and I wanted, my parents had gone home, unfortunately, to shower. I think they hadn't showered in days. They went home to shower. And so they were at their condo getting changed and showered when Terri actually died, unfortunately. But anyway, we wanted to be there, and we were forcibly removed. Which was not accurately reported by the media. And George Filos, you know what George Filos said? Michael's attorney came out and did a press conference. They said, what happened? Bobby is telling us that he was forcibly removed from the hospice room. And George Filo said, Bobby created a disturbance inside while visiting Terri and had to be physically removed from the room. He said, the reason I had to be removed was because I became I caused a disturbance inside in Terry's room, and they had to physically remove me, which wasn't true.
And as a final question, how would you encourage, because you're right that this case is talked about still, probably will be talked about for a long time. Just because I mean, the core issues that are addressed is the right to life or not, which is something that even as Americans now, we're still talking about with issues of abortion, so many other things. How would you encourage people, if they want to learn more about this, to be able to gain information that would give a wider perspective to what happened to Terri and her situation?
Sure, and I just want to just make sure, I'm not someone to impose what a person's medical decision should or should not be. I mean, if someone wants to decide they don't want a feeding tube at some certain point, if they become, whatever the reason might be, if they're incapacitated, that if they want to starve and dehydrate themselves to death, that's their choice. I mean, I'm not going to. And in fact, the work that we do, it's all voluntary, and families call us. We don't reach out to families when they need help. They contact us. So we're there to help them if they reach out to us. And we're not vitalist. We're not all about keeping people alive at all costs. And I mean, we understand, ethically, there's certain times where it could be appropriate to stop care. It just depends on individual situation. You just can't make a broad statement and say, okay, if someone has a brain injury like my sister, they should all have their feeding tubes removed because they have such a lousy quality of life. I mean, you should hear these things, Danielle. People say they make these comments about, oh, if I had a quality of life like Terri, what does that mean? Quality of life like Terri. I mean, if I had a quality of life like Terri, I think we should be able to end their lives. It's like, all right. So anyway, it's just such lack of knowledge and just ignorance when it comes to these issues. And you're right, people need to educate themselves. I would say, if you want to learn specifically about Terri's case, a wonderful podcast came out within the last year. It's called Lawless by Lynn Vincent. She did an in-depth, very comprehensive investigation of Terri's case from both sides, and I think she did a wonderful job. 14 episodes, about a half hour each. You can access it. You can go to our website. You can go just put in Lawless podcast, Lynn Vincent. You can listen to it. Lynn's a great storyteller, and I think you'll really have a much different understanding about Terri's case. And I'm very pleased with how she reported and investigated Terri's case. And I'm not saying this because, oh, she took my side of the family. She accurately portrayed Terri. She interviewed people that were helping Michael, so to speak. I mean, Michael refused to be interviewed, but others that were helping him did not. And they shared how they thought what they did, was to support Michael and why they did. So anyway, so Lawless it's to get a better. Plus, you can go to lifeandhope.com, our website. There's a terrischiavo.org website that has a lot of the legal documents, has all the medical affidavits that submitted them to the court regarding Terri. So there's a lot out there that they can learn about Terri's case. Lawless, terrischiavo.org, lifeandhope.org. We have a Facebook page, Terri Schiavo Life and Hope Network. These are all resources that can be used to learn about Terri's case. If you want to learn about this issue, I mean, obviously, there's all kinds of books and things you can read. Wesley J. Smith is he's a bioethicist and attorney who does some great writings and research on this case. And there's some other books, and you can always contact me. I try to make myself very accessible because I know the importance of this issue, and I don't I don't not answer anybody's question unless they get nasty or vulgar. I'm not going to answer that, but you can ask me any question you want about Terri. Even, I don't, people have to agree with what, with our position. That's fine. Just understand, just make sure you understand, what you're hearing is accurate. But I'll answer any question. I don't have any problem talking to somebody about this issue. Even if, on the other side, I just don't like when people get nasty or they start name calling or get mean spirited about it. I'm not gonna sit and listen to that. But contact me if you have any questions. I'm happy to answer any question you might have. So there's education, right, for anything is what needs to be done to really understand, so you can speak about it from a level of intellect that so someone will take you seriously. Because right now there's so many people that it's just not, you can't take them seriously when it comes to this by what the things that they say, and it's upsetting. But it's, what are you going to do? You just try to, we try to help people that call us, and we try to set the record straight if we possibly can. But when you have, sorry, Danny, I know I'm kind of going, but when you have the media, and I wish we would have talked more about this, but maybe if you want, we can talk again sometime. But when you have the media kind of driving this narrative of all this stuff out there that just isn't true, it's hard to really get a proper understanding of Terri's condition and of the case. So it's frustrating, but I'm gonna, God willing, God's given me his blessing to been doing this work for 20 years, almost 20 years now. I'm gonna keep doing it as long as I can, and I, until people, their human dignity is recognized in a way that they're treated, humanely, I'm going to continue to advocate for these individuals. So,
Well, listeners, again, you're listening here to Bobby Schindler talking about his sister, Terri Schiavo. So, Bobby, thank you so much. And again, I encourage you, as he said, there are a lot of resources to explore this issue more. And I encourage you to, because obviously this interview is short and there's not a whole bunch of information that can be relayed in 45 minutes. But I encourage you to do your own research on it, to learn more about this case and also just the issue of human life in general. But thank you so much again, Bobby. It was a gift to talk with you. Thank you too for being vulnerable and just sharing your story with me.
I mean, I'm sorry if I kind of if I went on monopolized on with some of the questions or went off, but as you can tell, I'm passionate. It's an important issue to me, and that's another get going. And there's so much I want to say that's not being said about protecting these and defending these individuals. It just kind of, obviously it's something I've dedicated my life to doing, and my heart breaks for these families and these patients and these persons in these conditions, and want to do whatever I can to protect them and help them. So, but I really appreciate you asking me, Danielle. It's nice of you to reach out, and again, if you have any questions in the future, happy to do anything or come back on if you want to at any point. But I appreciate your invitation, and thank you again for speaking with me tonight.